It all started with a thunderstorm of extraordinary beauty. It was clearly different from any other thunderstorm. People were drowning in fear from the roar that was in the streets. Many thought that it was more like a storm that no one expected. At this time, a thunderstorm hit the buildings, causing the lights to go out. The children, out of great fear, huddled close to the adults, who were also very frightened. A drop fell on one of the adults and he was very surprised because there was nowhere for water to come from in the middle of the shopping center. But as soon as he raised his head, he immediately understood everything. He was immediately overcome with horror from what he saw. An unprecedented monster appeared before the guy's eyes with a huge tongue, horns, and huge fangs. The monster's eyes also glowed red. The monsters began to destroy everything around. There were a huge number of them. They killed anyone who got in their way. Fear froze on people's faces at the mere sight of these monsters. They did not know how to act. Someone started to run and not everyone managed to escape. Many died in this shopping center that day. But one of the guys still managed to escape from this place without even being harmed by the monsters. He was finally able to catch his breath after the long run on which his life depended. The situation in the city was amazing. Lightning struck most of the buildings. People could not understand what was happening and simply watched. The guy really thought that the end of the world had come. As it turned out, such anomalies occurred all over the world at the same time. Later, it turned out that the buildings where lightning struck turned into lairs of monsters, and people could only flee. Such buildings were called dungeons, and many countries began sending military forces there to assess threats and gather information. As it turned out during such studies, conventional weapons were useless against such anomalies. The army simply could not cope with it. Many soldiers died in the dungeons, and those who could still retreat could not help. The monsters were huge and had enormous power that people could not cope with. Many of the monsters had extraordinary abilities and high combat strength. People plunged into despair until one moment their saviors appeared to them. Unexpectedly for the military, a man appeared who asked everyone to be careful and bend down. The man took out a card of an unusual format and was about to throw it. He said, "Gate," then threw the card into the air. Unexpectedly for everyone, an unusually huge knight with a sword appeared, ready for battle. And it was controlled by an unremarkable young man, who nicknamed this creature the Scarlet Knight. Now the battle was on the side of the people. The knight who fought for them was quickly able to defeat the monsters of this dungeon. As it turned out later, these were awakened. And instead of ordinary weapons, they used special cards called gate cards. The maps were developed in secret laboratories by scientists who foresaw the appearance of dungeons. Soon, more and more awakened ones began to appear who could control the power of the cards. Those awakened during the fight against the dungeons became heroes of humanity. Soon companies appeared that, in collaboration with the awakened ones, built a business on clearing dungeons. In a world where this has always posed a threat, the awakened became the elite of society. A young man named Okita Hikaru was also one of the awakened ones and had been working for a dungeon clearing company for 3 years. Okito's father was killed by monsters. His mother tried with all her might not to let him in, and he remembers how he burst into tears. Afterwards, the guy's mother ended up in the hospital and, left with his younger sister, he didn't know how they would cope further. And Okito decided to try to take the test and find out if he could be awakened. The guy just had to wait his turn. After it was Okito's turn, he was asked to put his hand to the device with the card to determine its potential. His expectations and hopes were high as he raised his hand to the device. He didn't understand what was happening, or whether anything was happening at all. In the distance, the voice of one of the scientists observing the process was heard. The scientist wanted to declare it unsuitable, but his colleague asked him to wait, noticing that something was still happening. No one has ever received such a low score, namely 100,000%. But still, Okito was declared accepted among the awakened ones. Unfortunately, he was assigned the lowest possible rank, but as it happens, despite receiving a license because of his rank, he could not get a job. Working part-time in a bunch of places, he barely managed to make ends meet. The attitude towards Okito was not special. He took on any job he found. But one day everything changed. He received a letter from very influential people. One of the largest companies, Clearwater, has begun an active search for personnel. Okito was very happy, as was his entire family, that they even wanted to hire him for a job with his rank. The guy decided that if he didn't relax and put all his strength into it, he could provide a happy life for his family. True, he could not even imagine that he would face the oppression of rank and the cruelty of inequality. This inequality was especially evident in dungeon clearing. Many low-ranking workers were only protection for higher ranks. People with high ranks really thought this was appropriate and said that they allow you to train in this way. Thus, the company recruited people only to protect the elite. Low ranks were just cannon fodder, who after death could be easily replaced by the same awakened ones without special skills. Okita found himself at the center of events when the elite decided to simply frame the awakened ones. And the guy also ended up in a dungeon with the most powerful monster. Okita didn't want to die so easily. While the monster was preparing to carry out its attack, there was great fear in the eyes of the guy watching this until a miracle happened. The guy found himself in an empty white space, thinking only that he was able to escape and did not die. After catching his breath a little, the guy noticed something unusual in the distance. Coming closer and examining the guy, he realized that it was some kind of altar, but he did not understand how it worked. By touching this altar, the guy received an extraordinary ability. After Okita touched the altar, a huge number of cards fell out of his bag. And that day, he gained the ability to create unlimited quantities of them. The cards were different, and Okita understood that if anyone had acquired such an ability, he would definitely be invincible. The guy chose the most interesting card for himself and decided to try it out. He decided to try to summon a dark two-headed serpent. Having started the call, the card began to glow purple, and so did the guy's eyes. Having uttered the words of appeal, the guy threw back the card and waited for the card to respond. The map turned into a huge energy field from which the one the guy called appeared, while only the supposed appearance could be seen. The full appearance of a two-headed snake appeared in front of Okita. The snake was huge horns and wings, bright yellow eyes full of evil and ready to attack at any moment. A battle broke out in which no one could yet imagine the outcome. One air attack by a two-headed snake looked very massive. But not only did she look like it, she also hit the big space. This truly was extraordinary power. Okita's eyes acquired the ability to determine the strength and ability of the enemy. Now he saw absolutely everything. The realization that no one else had such power amazed him, and he planned to continue the battle. Without understanding much, everyone tried to stop Okita or run away, thinking that only death awaited them. A much larger and stronger monster appeared in front of the guy, but he stood confidently and knew that this battle would be won. He summoned 2 more gate cards. The realization that he could create an unlimited number of cards helped him. He understood that he would not be left without cards even if a huge amount was spent. His head was completely devoted to finally taking revenge, and he had the opportunity to deliver justice. The guy was happy that he could finally do everything to keep his soul calm. The Clearwater Company employs many high-ranking elite awakened people. The guy was so happy to get a job in such a prestigious company. True, reality was not so colorful. One day they were sent to a C-rank dungeon, which in the past was the building of a pharmaceutical company. The level 9 dungeon was dangerous, and it also looked very intimidating. It was dangerous to move around. Any extra rustle could wake up the monsters. I had to be very careful in my actions and in all my weapons. 2 of the awakened ones had already reached their destination, but their radar was working very poorly. Since their radar was not working well, they were already planning to complete their research and return to the others. But they could not even think that they were being watched. True, the monsters did not try to hide. The dropping of a pebble from somewhere above showed the awakened ones that they were trapped. Looking up at them, monsters were already flying from all sides, or rather goblins who belonged to the F rank. All they could do was run, but trying might not help. One of the guys was captured by the goblin, and the second could only watch in shock. When the guy realized what was happening, he began to ask for help and try to escape. But the guy who was in the power of the goblin at that moment was experiencing impossible pain. A shot was heard, signaling the arrival of help. It was already clear that they had been deliberately lured into a trap. The shot was of extraordinary power. It was definitely not fired from an ordinary weapon. This allowed the goblin to be hit enough for him to finally fall and let the guy go. Also, all the goblins that were collected in this place were destroyed. The guy was just happy that they managed to survive in such a situation. The girl who came did not understand how the awakened ones could not even cope with goblins, and also did not understand why such people needed to be paid at all. Okita ran at great speed, worrying about each of the guys. The guy grabbed Okito's hand, apparently hoping for reassurance. Awakened ones of a higher level also approached and clarified the report on the situation. The girl said that 4 goblins were defeated in the battle, and that no traces of magic stones were found. The girl also clarified that there was a complete attack on 2 low-ranking people, and, based on their condition, they would not be able to help with further cleanup. One of the guys was lying on the ground unconscious, and the second was trying to somehow even out his breathing. Okito said loudly that they should return to safety and help the wounded first. This statement shocked the elite. There was a flash of rage in the girl's eyes and she hit him on the cheek as if wanting to banish his stupidity forever. The injured guys begged not to be abandoned, but everything was clear. Okito still didn't give up, but already asked to stay just to heal the guys. Okito was warned not to waste his magic. If he uses the cards without permission, he faces a fine. Okito did not want to receive fines again, and the fear of the power of the elite weighed on him. He asked for forgiveness from the injured guys and immediately rushed after the rest of the group. The guys could only watch as the team began to move further and further into the depths of the dungeon. The team was made up of elite awakened, many of whom had reached A rank, and also from the awakened ones of low rank, among whom was Okito. But they were only pawns in purges, since such people were always easy to replace. Despite his fear, Okito still decided and asked one of the girls named Noguchi for help, who was clearly not happy with his impudence. Namely, he asked to give his team weapons. Noguchi was next to him in one swift movement, grabbed him by the shirt and, looking into his eyes with a threat, reminded him that the team already had weapons. She then asked him to stop saying nonsense. In fact, the elite had not only gate cards in their arsenal, but also the latest weapons designed to fight monsters in the dungeons. The bullets for such weapons used magic stones which can appear after the death of monsters, but due to their high value, such weapons were not issued to low ranks. Low ranks generally did not have the best equipment. To a greater extent, they were given something only for self-defense, and not something that was suitable for combat. Even the elite's costumes were custom-made and made of a special material that could protect them from some damage. The costumes of low ranks were the most ordinary, which made them more vulnerable and they could only rely on themselves. Okito had an F rank, which was the lowest rank. He did not even have the right to participate in battles. For everyone, he was just a servant. The outside of the building had not even changed, but appearances were deceiving. Inside the building, there was a dungeon where any wrong step could cost one's life. The huge weight on Okito's back was unbearable with so many steps, but he couldn't do anything about it. Having finished the journey, the first thing he wanted to do was to at least catch his breath from such a walk. So he found himself in the place where they were heading as a team. The 10th level dungeon appeared before him. Just realizing the danger he was in gave the guy goosebumps. Fear was visible on his face. The team realized that they could no longer relax, because monsters could attack at any moment. Everyone began to actively defend themselves and keep the situation under control. Movement appeared on the Okito sensor, which was also accompanied by a sound signal. Everyone who heard this sound immediately turned to the guy and expected information from him. The guy conveyed information that a large group of goblins was heading towards them. The sensors also showed that there were about 10 of them. The goblins were already moving towards them. They definitely felt the presence of the team. A crowd of angry monsters was already visible, or rather their eyes were visible, which were revealed by a glow from the darkness. Seeing their prey, the goblins began to advance even faster. The girls, seeing the approaching crowd, only waited for instructions from the squad leader. The commander announces readiness to attack, and also gives instructions to destroy the front ranks without using the gate. He also warned the girls to be prepared for surprise attacks and told them not to waste ammo. Their equanimity and fortitude evoked admiration. They clearly understood their capabilities and were ready to destroy the monsters, but it was as if they were deliberately waiting for them to approach. The jaw of one of the goblins was already clearly visible, as if one more jump and he would tear his victim apart. A shot was heard. The girl understood what it was like to be on the verge of life and death, but then something happened that no one expected. They did not die. The girls were extremely focused on the attack, but even this did not allow them to kill any of the monsters. The shots kept following each other. The girls did not let go of the trigger and held the line. Only after a certain number of shots did the monsters fall dead. Suddenly, one of the goblins broke through to Okito, which the girl immediately warned him about. Okito was consumed by fear of what could happen to him now, but he understood even earlier that this could happen. The guy was not going to give up just like that and decided that he would defend himself, despite his fears. Okito didn't expect the goblin to be so close to him, but he was glad that everyone like him didn't have a gun. He understood that he still needed to do something, and decided that he would attack. With a scream, he hits the monster, but something is clearly not going as he imagined. The monster was apparently only amused by such an attack. He bent down slightly towards the guy, which made the guy fearful and seemed to chuckle at him. The goblin's eyes immediately changed color. It seemed like nothing had changed in this look, but it was definitely a more furious look than before that moment. Or maybe it seemed like that to the guy. The goblin immediately attacked the guy, causing him to fly to the side with the thought that death had overtaken him so quickly. Unexpectedly for him, his life was not interrupted. One of the girls arrived in time and killed the goblin. She said sarcastically that he couldn't even cope with an ordinary goblin, saying that he had settled down too comfortably while also receiving a salary for it. Okita was outraged by such statements. They had clearly never been on equal terms. He did not have such a powerful magical weapon, but only a stick that gave an electric shock and he had nothing else. He was angry at the fact that if he had a normal weapon, he could fight just like everyone else. And if the gate cards were more improved, he could even use them without being bullied by higher ranks. He believed that he was not given a chance. The news was heard that the cleanup was over. All that was left of the goblins was a small amount of smoke as if they were simply disappearing. The commander reminded the squad not to forget to collect magic stones, but the catch was definitely not what they expected. There were only 2 stones and they were very small, but everyone understood that these were just goblins, and much could not be expected from them. After the death of a monster, magic stones could remain. Particles of magical power. Rare stones obtained from strong monsters were used for gate cards and unlocked unique abilities, and shards from low-rank monsters were used. But the whole point was that activating a powerful skill required a huge amount of magic, so that fragments were sometimes required by awakened people of high ranks. Magic stones could only be obtained by those who killed the monster, so for many awakened people this was unattainable. And for those who could kill monsters, this was a good reason to please the commander. The leader asked Okita with some contempt where the stairs to the next level of the dungeon would be. Okita reports that the stairs are 40 meters away from them. The team is about to leave. Unexpectedly for everyone, a sound is heard from the radar, indicating the approach of monsters. Unexpectedly for everyone, the silhouette of a monster appeared, representing a lion on 2 legs, walking like a man, and in his front paws he had an axe. A deafening roar was heard, indicating that the monster knew about the presence of unwanted guests. Okita was shocked by what he saw, which could not be said about the others. They had already met monsters of this level, and it did not surprise them. The monster took the last step out of the shadows and appeared completely. The steps were very weighty and of a huge area. It was a lion, a werewolf of rank C, and also monsters appeared before them who were given the name of lions. Guardians, and they were rank D. The monster itself looked very frightening. It was bright purple. Its roar was soul-piercing. His eyes glowed white with a glimpse of violet pupil. Everyone understood that it would definitely be more difficult than in the battle with goblins, but the commander asked Okita to check the information about the lion werewolf just in case. Okita, having checked the information, reported that firearms would not be suitable in the case of this monster, since such weapons did not work for this monster, and also reported that the monster did not have any special skills. The squad leader said that the guards would guard the main enemy and would act together, so the first thing they needed to do was break through the defense. Further actions were announced to the shield detachment to create protective barriers and under no circumstances leave their positions, protecting the rank A detachment. Fear consumed these guys, but they accepted the order and would definitely never say a word against it. The girls announced that they would not care if the guys died, but if their shields were broken by their actions, the girls would personally deal with them. Everyone accepted the fact that they were just a living wall for rank A and nothing more. The monster has not yet taken any action towards the squad. Each of the guys understood that this was their fate, the fate of low-ranking awakened ones. Okita, who suffered from an ordinary goblin, could only shout to the guys to take care of themselves. And in his heart, he could only wish and ask that they not die in this battle. Okita watched in fear. He, like everyone else, could only listen to the plan for further actions and watch the monster. Everyone was ready to act if they were suddenly attacked. The monster no longer expected action from people and growled angrily. It was likely that his growl was a signal for an attack from his guards, and he was also ready to attack if necessary. The guard lions immediately rushed to attack. They were very fast. Immediately, an order came from the commander about the readiness of the maps and that no one should think about retreating. The guards incredibly rushed towards the awakened team, but there was no order from their leader to activate the cards. The monsters were getting closer and closer. Most likely fear was creeping through the guys standing at the activation of the shields. Here the commander's order was heard to wait for the monsters to approach as much as possible so that they would be as close to them as possible. The shield guys were really scared, but they knew that their leader wouldn't let them just die. The monsters' mouths were already half a meter away from the team, and an order was heard to activate the shields. The entire team immediately reacts and activates their cards at the same time. The defensive barrier card was a D rank. It could only create a barrier that protected against physical attacks. Any awakened person could activate such a card, but only low ranks were hired for such work. All cards were already active. Everyone could only expect attacks from high ranks. At that moment, a guard crashed into one of the shields. The shock wave from the collision threw the man away from the shield, causing him pain. The guards were at a loss. Why can't they attack people? And the guys just shouted that they wouldn't be able to hold the shields for long and asked the higher ones to start an attack. One of the girls shouted so that the low-ranking ones would not worry so much and was already preparing a card to activate the gate. And then she heard gate, and the map immediately began to light up with fiery shades. She lamented that the guys would appreciate the ability of rank A and continued the activation. Then the appearance of War began to appear. Everyone saw the girl using her A-rank Fire Warrior ability. He attacked with a sword, causing not only physical damage but also fire damage. She enjoyed fighting and seemed to tell the monsters that she would turn them to ash. After her words, an attack followed. It was of incredible power. After the attack, the guard immediately jumped up on his two hind legs and howled in pain. How not to howl when you're burning? The other half of the shield squad, those holding the second guard, asked for help for them too. The attitude of both girls towards those who protected them was the same. But the second girl was also already preparing to activate her gate. By impatiently saying gate, she seemed to be ordering him not to complain. In the case of the second girl, the card shimmered green. She summoned the Wind Warrior. Then the War of the Winds appearance appeared. He was also a rank A card and owned the element of wind which could tear the enemy apart. After that, the girl only said, "Destroy him." An attack from her card followed, and the monster also did not imagine an attack of such power. Wounds appeared all over the guard's body, from which streams of air escaped. The man watching this from below could only shudder in fear. Having dealt with the monsters in a short period of time, the girls shook their fists and praised each other. Okita immediately reminded everyone that the battle was not over yet, and that there was still a lion left, a werewolf. Unfortunately, the shield squad made the same mistake, relaxing in advance. The attack of the main enemy was already approaching them. She had incredible power, destroying everything around her. The shields immediately crumbled into small pieces. Even the ground under our feet began to crack. The shield squad's fear was simply incredible. They also suffered from this attack. The low-ranking squad did not expect such a thing. They could not even imagine the strength of the monster that so easily managed to destroy their defense. The guys only tried to crawl away and not get under the next attack. Many were wounded. Okita, seeing this, without thinking about his life, rushed to the rescue. He rushed and thought about how to quickly get to the place of the main actions. In fact, he was not rushing to help, but to achieve another goal. He only screamed that he would distract the monster. Okita believed that this was not a bad chance for him to show himself, to show that he was capable of something more, and that he could participate in battles. Immediately, a voice was heard calling the guy, and then immediately followed by a blow. Not to say that Okita got off lightly. It hit him in the face. Even the monster was surprised by this outcome of events, just as the guy did not understand why he was treated so rudely. Immediately, they began to scold the guy, saying that he should not have taken such a risk. It was also noted that he has the lowest rank and is only capable of healing others. This was followed by another blow, so that the guy would no longer dare to put himself above others. The girl immediately began to activate the same card as was used earlier. She also mentioned that only the upper classes engage in battles, saying further, the gate. The Fire Warrior immediately appeared and immediately attacked. As soon as the warrior appeared, he launched the same first attack aimed at the monster. At that moment, the order came to set up protective barriers for the shield squad, and the fighters immediately got to work using their cards. There was also an order for Okita to treat the victims of this battle. The elixir card was rank F. It helped restore strength and heal minor wounds. Summoning the gate, he began to heal the guys from the shield squad. Okita was shocked by how quickly the guys jumped up and ran to continue working, also saying words of gratitude to the guy for the work done. Those healed immediately activated their cards to strengthen their defense. True, a werewolf attack was already approaching them. The shock wave, which instantly destroyed all the protective shields that the guys had put up, also knocked everyone down and caused injuries. The girls did not know that the monster would be so stable. They thought that one person could easily deal with it. Immediately noticing this, the second girl called on her War of the Winds. Even the commander was prepared for this call and warned that the defense should never weaken and be maintained at a high level. Unfortunately, in such battles only the lower ranks could risk their lives. They took the blow upon themselves. Everyone understood that they were only capable of defense and accepted this fact. They just waited for the high-ranking awakened ones to do the rest. The battle continued, and at this time Okita was also treating and thinking. During treatment, he could only think about how pathetic he was. He believed that he was letting everyone down because he couldn't even use the shield card. In his head, there were only thoughts about how everything would end for him in the end. The battle was almost over. The monster was definitely no longer able to attack, but it was not yet defeated. The girls decided to ask their leader for help. The leader had the card ready, but until that moment he had not activated it. However, he began to do so immediately after the request. This card began to light up in shades of blue. The call looked incredibly beautiful. A hand began to appear from the card. It was clear that the leader of the group was also the strongest of all. His element was water. The commander was proud of his warrior. Warrior of the Sea was the name of the warrior who was called by the leader of the group. He controlled the flow of water and could pierce everything with his spear. After the call, the order came to destroy the monster, and the warrior immediately launched an attack. One attack was enough for the monster to fall and the battle was over. As soon as the battle ended, an unusual phenomenon began for some members of the team. Or to be more precise, the formation of a magic stone began. It was a stone of high rarity, and the leader received it. As you know, the awakened one who destroyed the monster received the magic stone, and the guys of low ranks were once again left with nothing. Due to the unequal efforts put into battles, many low-ranking awakened people quit because they believed that their efforts simply did not pay off. Okita believed that the world was mired in inequality and injustice, both in ordinary office work and in work in the dungeons. The leader called Okita over and asked if the guy was really trying to protect someone from a werewolf during the battle. The boss praised the guy, suggesting a gamble with a rank A card, which the leader saved for the maze boss. Is Okita ready to use this card in battle? Okita agreed, although he was very surprised by this, and the high-ranking girl was surprised that the leader was giving the card to the guy and did not understand it. The leader explained to the girl that the guy rushed to help despite the fact that the enemy was very strong, and also added that not everyone could risk themselves like that. The girl really didn't like this outcome of events. She didn't understand why a low-ranking person was honored to receive such a card. The commander warned Okita that this card was one of the most powerful and that it could only be used upon command. The map is designed to capture monsters. Afterwards, he said that everyone can only have one card and the guy will not be able to continue using the elixir card, which means they will only have one attempt to deal with the boss. The commander asked not to let the team down, to which Okita answered in the affirmative. Okita was glad to finally have the opportunity to show himself. He considered this a good chance to increase his status. The girl did not understand the leader's actions but left everything as it was. Finally, everyone reached the 10th level of the dungeon. The huge number of steps overwhelmed everyone, especially after such a battle. The dungeon was even darker than before, but Okita enthusiastically examined the drawings and directed the entire team. Okita reported that they were approaching the hall with the boss following the drawings. The girl enthusiastically followed the guy's actions and praised him for such great knowledge in drawings, but the guy only replied that he studied it at the university. During the conversation, the unexpected happened. The radar reported a very large monster that was approaching the team. Okita immediately informed the team about this, and everyone also heard sounds coming from behind them. At first, everyone was attracted by the unusual eyes of orange shades, and there were more than 2 eyes. The head was simply huge. As it turned out, there were 5 eyes and they gave a complete view. The team also suggested that this could be the boss of this dungeon. Okita, like everyone present, definitely did not expect to see a monster of such size and was horrified. The monster was incredibly huge, but so far it was only watching and not preparing to attack. With every second, the monster's gaze became more aggressive. Everyone felt this look and everyone understood that they were facing a battle. Emitting an angry roar, the monster informed everyone that the battle had begun. Many could only freeze in anticipation of action from a huge monster. They believed that it would be impossible to turn the battle in their direction. Immediately, the leader pacified everyone and said that if they decide to just run away, then they will have to return here. An order followed that everyone should monitor the actions of the monster and not fall under its attacks. In Okita's case, he was ordered to search for information about the monster. He had failures in finding information, but he continued to try. Okita reported that there was no information about the monster, and also added that most of all this creature resembles a basilisk. The commander realized that what he heard was true, and also realized that the monster could use poison like basilisks do. The leader warned everyone that the boss most likely belongs to the same class as the basilisk. Everyone was ordered to take their positions and be ready for battle. This frightened many, but they understood that they could not resist the commander's words and began to take their positions. The boss ordered the girls of rank A to prepare cards and check how the attacks affect the monster. The guys from the shield squad received an order to set up barriers 3 in a row. Okita was the secret weapon of this battle, and he was also asked not to interfere in this for now. The guy understood that the outcome of the battle depended on him. Okita absolutely loved the feeling of being important, even if its importance was temporary. The time had come to test the monster's powers. The commander immediately ordered the cards to be taken out, and everyone was ready. The monster understood where everything was going and was not against such events. There followed an angry roar coming from the boss, and there was only hope for the strength of the team. The voice of the leader was heard, who said that it was possible to begin an attack on the boss, and there was complete hope that the team would not let us down. The monster was advancing on the team, although there was wild fear and misunderstanding. But everyone just followed the orders. The activation of the shield cards followed, but many may not have expected such an outcome. Everyone was afraid of such a monster, but everyone tried to hold on. The monster's paw was already rushing towards the shields that had been set up by the team. Those who were afraid turned out to be right. With one blow, the monster destroyed all the barriers and immediately broke through. Many did not understand how it happened that the monster so easily destroyed all the protection and immediately called on their warriors. The top ranks decided to resort to the strongest option and use a triple attack. The boss was definitely not ready for such an attack. The team thought that with such an attack they could overthrow the enemy, but as it turned out they were wrong. The monster only staggered a little after such an attack and most likely only became more angry. The team also noticed how the monster's anger became greater. Drool even began to run from the monster's mouth, and its eyes began to express greater rage. The highest ranks did not even imagine that even a general attack would not cause any damage to the monster. A terrifying howl of a monster was heard, and everyone understood what would happen next. Everyone turned out to be right. Immediately after the howl, there was an attack with the tail. This attack subjected everyone to suffering and pain. Few were able to dodge it. Someone lost their cards after this attack, but without a map, they could not continue the battle. The girl of the highest rank did not like this behavior of the monster, and she lost her temper and began to act without a plan. Okita and the leader were frightened by this. They understood that the formation had been disrupted, and the battle was not going according to plan. The order was received to disperse and return to the exit, as everyone else did. Even Okita realized that A-rank awakened ones were powerless against the dungeon boss. While the guy was thinking about what could be done in this situation, he heard the commander call out to him. The commander announced that the situation forced him to use the card and asked Okita if he was ready for this. The guy was decisive in this matter, and he already knew exactly his answer. The leader also said that the card has a large radius of influence and that this effect will be exerted on everyone. This was followed by an explanation that made it clear to Okita that he would have to fight the boss alone. Then the commander turned to Okita and said that he had offered to hire him. The guy was pleasantly surprised that he was chosen, and he was curious why the leader decided so. He explained that he highly values people who are willing to make sacrifices for the team. Okita also heard that they had not made a mistake in him. The commander said that he was glad that he had made the right choice then. The leader really showed Okita that now everything depends only on him and asked him not to let him down. Okita understood the responsibility that lay with him. The leader informed everyone that Okita needed to get as close to the monster as possible and would need to be protected. Everyone wished him good luck, and there was no end to the guy's happiness because for the first time he was noticed by someone of higher rank. Okita believed that he had to live up to everyone's expectations, and then perhaps he could get a promotion. The order to begin the attack followed, and everyone rushed to carry out their plans. The whole job was to distract the monster as much as possible so that Okita could get to him. The higher ones had already called upon their warriors and were ready to hold out for as long as possible. Attacks were carried out from anywhere possible, even from firearms, to increase the chances of successful implementation. At this time, Okita was already approaching the monster, not even intending to observe the progress of the battle. In his head, he thanked everyone for their support and was already close to the boss. Okita raised his head and saw that he might end up under the monster's paw, and the plan would be in vain. The monster's paw was already above the guy's head. The only thing that could save him was his reaction. The reaction really saved the guy. He managed to dodge the attack. Perhaps the adrenaline in his blood and not the desire to let someone down helped him. Okito only encouraged himself that he could handle this and continued to run. Then he heard the leader's cherished order that it was time to activate the gate card. He understood that the outcome of the battle would now be decided and immediately began activation. And here he is, with a card in his hands, preparing to pronounce the cherished phrases. From his lips one hears gate, release, and magic begins to happen. The map lights up in orange-golden hues, also rising into the sky. The monster was perplexed and only expected what would happen next. Perhaps only one leader knew how this card worked. The map truly captured a huge amount of space, and it began interacting with the monster. Okito did not fully understand whether he could still cope with his task or not. The crackling of the soil was heard underfoot, which brought even greater misunderstanding of what was happening. As it turned out, it was not just a crash, but no longer small destruction of the soil. And now Okito is flying into the unknown and darkness. He did not even understand that this was really happening. When he realized that he was flying into the unknown, he immediately began to call for help. Okito fell with a roar, hitting the rocks. As soon as the guy landed, he tried to get up through the strength and pain. He still managed to gather all his strength and get to his feet. Also not far from him lay a pile of stones, which did not attract the guy's attention. But in fact, the boss was sitting in this pile of stones. Okito didn't even think about looking around, he just wandered off in bewilderment. He noticed the team standing on top and wondered why he fell alone. Okito decided to find out what was going on and called the leader. The guy was wondering what was happening and why he ended up in some kind of hole. The girls incorrigibly broke into a sarcastic smile. Perhaps they knew the leader's plan in advance. And the leader himself also smiled sarcastically. He immediately came up with such a plan. They started laughing hard at the situation Okito was in. It was funny to them that the guy really fell into the same hole. Okito was perplexed by this, but later they explained to him why this happened. The leader, also laughing, told the guy that the card he had had no attacks. This card is a trap card. Such a card is intended to lure the enemy. When activated, the card destroys the entire space next to it, which means that not only the monster is trapped, but also the owner of the card. What the team needed was to lure the monster into a trap with someone, since the leader knew that there was only one way to kill the monster. The commander read that the monster is vulnerable only to attacks in the mouth, and according to the materials he read, the monster opens its mouth wide before eating its prey. Okito immediately realized that he could not find any information about the monster on his tablet. It turned out that the leader corrected the information in the tablet in advance, so that no one would find out the boss's weak point ahead of time. When Okito realized that he was initially used as bait, he was knocked out of life. He simply stood in horror and remembered the words that the leader told him about how he values such employees. The girl was clearly mockingly telling the guy that he was so stupid that he believed it. Then the crash of stones was heard nearby. An unbearable roar of the monster was heard. Everyone realized that Okito had been noticed. The monster clearly wanted to get rid of the guy as quickly as possible and was already preparing to attack. An attack with claws immediately followed, which brought wild pain to Okito. The team just laughed at the guy and the situation he found himself in because of them. Okito, in pain, thought only about how this could happen. The guy had only one question in his head. How do they have the courage to kill people so easily? The monster didn't really need Okito. The watching team didn't understand why the monster allowed the guy to escape. One of the girls decided to act and called on her warrior to launch an attack. Immense attacks on the monster began, which only amused the girl. Okito could also suffer from these attacks and tried in every possible way to stop them, but he failed. He couldn't breathe due to the dust and smoke coming from the attacks and decided not to try to stop them. The guy decided to run and not look back. Some attacks also hit him and burned him. He understood that if the monster did not kill him, he could easily burn alive. Everyone who was upstairs continued to be sarcastic and laugh at Okito, saying that he would taste better fried and with a crust. Something disturbed the leader, and at that moment his face changed from a grin to surprise. The commander immediately said to stop the attack, realizing that something was going wrong. Okito felt a green light on himself and turned to look at what was happening. And then he realized that the monster was preparing an attack. A green light emanated from the monster, and the thought of grazing them also appeared. Okito assumed that the monster was preparing a poison attack and decided to hide at least under his jacket. He still doubted whether it would be a poison attack or not. The attack was already ready, the monster was taking aim, it was already useless to run. Okito covers himself with his jacket and squats down. All he can do is rely on his not very successful defense. The guy can only scream and think about how his life went. Then Okito's scream changed to surprise. He could not understand why he was still alive. Raising his head upward, he realized that the attack was poisonous gas, which means that it was heading upward. He understood that he was saved by the attacks inflicted by the team earlier, since due to the difference in temperature, all the evaporation went up. The leader understood that due to the early fire attacks, all the fumes were directed towards them, and the rest of the team was clearly frightened by this outcome of events. Okita was still amazed that what saved him was that he was very low from the others, and understood that the gas simply did not reach him. The team rushed from side to side and thought about what to do, because everyone understood that after a short period they could suffocate. The leader immediately orders a retreat to the exit from the dungeon, also trying to calm down the team's anxiety. Okita understands that this is a convenient moment for him to retreat further from the monster, since he is still distracted by the team. The guy understood that he most likely destroyed an entire floor with his card, which means that they are now on the 9th floor. He just needs to find a passage that leads to the corridors and he can escape. He noticed a small crevice and was thinking about how to get to it because he was severely injured. Okita decided that he should try to get to the crevice, no matter how much it hurt him at that moment. The monster began to rage. He was furious. Okita realized that he had less and less time to escape. The monster had already noticed the guy, and he decided to use all his strength to make it in time. The guy was bleeding and in great pain, but he managed to escape from the monster. He continued to move in the direction and kept wondering why they did this to him. Deep down, he understood that the guys of the lower ranks would be treated the same way as him, but he was faced with another problem. He realized that he was at a dead end, and given all his injuries, it was unbearable for him to go back and look for another way. He could not understand how this happened. He only thought that there could be no dead end. Okita thought that he must be in some of the corridors. With every minute he moved worse and worse and was already leaning on the wall. The guy in his heart begged that the exit would be somewhere nearby, realizing that his strength was becoming less and less. He saw a bright light emanating from the crack and was glad that he had found a way out. His thoughts were filled with joy. He realized that he could be saved now. Okita definitely saw the light, and this only meant that there was definitely some kind of room there. But he had a problem. He did not understand how to open it and could only push into the unknown. An unbearably loud sound was heard behind him, which immediately made Okita turn around. Something happened that he definitely did not expect. The monster collapsed the stone deposits and he was definitely looking for the guy. Fragments were flying at Okita, as if he was trying to protect his head from the stones that were falling in his direction. He fell to the ground, covering his head with his hands, experiencing pain, but he tried to save himself. Then he noticed that the monster was preparing an attack, and his thoughts were filled only with the fact that he couldn't just die here, because he was one step away from salvation. All Okita could do was try to crawl and scream. He only screamed that the room would finally open. The monster was almost ready to attack, which only meant that there were only a few seconds left. Okita understood this, screamed and fought with his hands, with the hope that the room would open. And the light became brighter. The room opened, but was it an ordinary room? The guy flew down in the flickering of bright lights. He clearly could not understand where he ended up. He fell with a crash into an unknown room, but due to past injuries, he needed time to recover. The guy also suffered injuries when he fell. He injured his lip and was in extreme pain. As a result, the injuries were so huge that he lost consciousness. Unimaginable things began to happen. Okita began to glow all over. He regained consciousness, although he could not understand what was happening to him. Okita didn't understand how he survived, because he really thought that he would die even after finding salvation from the monster. The guy got to his feet and first of all began to look around, not understanding where he ended up. Looking around, he realized that this was a very huge room. The next thing he thought of was where the dungeon boss was now, but having looked around carefully, the guy realized that there was no entrance here, which amazed the guy immensely and he found himself at a loss. Then understanding began to dawn on him. He understood for sure that he had managed to escape, but was everything so easy? Immediately, Okita thought that he was locked in a place unknown to him. Is this such a salvation? Looking at the floor, he noticed that the drawings were similar to those on the gate maps. In his head, while he was looking at the patterns on the floor, he realized that this was all very strange and unusual. The sensations in the room also seemed strange to Okita, as if everything was saturated with magic of the same kind as the stones falling from the monsters. In the distance, he noticed a light. Just like in the face of death before, he was very interested in this light. Okita was visited by memories. He remembered that, thanks to him, he was saved, and he wanted to find out what kind of light this was. An altar appeared before his eyes, from which voices also emanated, which Okita could not make out. He decided to take a closer look. The altar was incredibly beautiful, which did what it did, attracting all the guy's attention to itself. Okita wanted to touch him, which he did and immediately removed his hand. Phrases began to come from the altar in different languages of the world, which the guy could not understand. He didn't even understand where this sound was coming from or who was trying to talk to him. Finally, he heard iconic phrases in his native language. Altar recognized Japanese and began speaking in it. When turning to Okita, the question was heard. Does he want power? The guy could not imagine this and was shocked. Remembering all the humiliation from the highest ranks, he himself asked himself the same question. He made a decision for himself that he really wanted this power, no matter what it was about. He didn't care what stood in front of him. He was confident in what he was doing. No matter how stupid it was that he wanted power for the sake of revenge, a question immediately followed from the altar about confirming the conclusion of the contract. After confirmation, the scanning immediately began, which the guy was clearly surprised by. Then he heard information that the probability of being chosen was 95%. Some settings were also adopted. Immediately, restoration of the damage began and Okito's wounds began to disappear on their own. The guy's surprise only grew. After the phrase about restoring vision, he felt that his eyes began to feel different. He decided to take off his glasses, and information was immediately heard from the altar about replacing the cards with higher ones. Okita once again began to be overwhelmed by memories of all the humiliations. Something unusual distracted him from his memories, but he did not immediately understand what was happening. His gate card bag caught his attention, and then he remembered. Immediately, he was overtaken by memories of what the leader told him when he gave him the card of destruction. He was blatantly lied to about the fact that an awakened person cannot have more than one card. He realized that now he was without a map at all, since the map of destruction had been lost. An incredible thing began to happen to the altar. It kept repeating the same thing, and the guy thought that it was buggy. Okita began to think that something bad might happen, since an incomprehensible glow began to emanate from the altar, and it only grew. This glow began to scare the guy. Then something began to happen to the crystal itself on the altar. It began to shake incredibly. The guy decided that the best way to avoid what could happen was to run away, which he did. There was an explosion. The guy really made the right decision, which may have saved him. But Okita was still thrown back by the shockwave. He did not know what was happening. Lying on the floor, he tried to understand whether everything was over or not. Having risen, he watched the crystal and realized that apparently some kind of system had turned off. Okita only understood that silence had returned again, and the only thing the guy had left was... He really just started shouting at the crystal that it promised to make the cards higher. But there was no answer. Then he noticed that something was wrong with the card bag. He realized that after all, a strong card could appear there. Okita decided to personally verify whether something worked out for the system or not. Having opened the bag and even not looking at the map, the guy decided to immediately activate the gate. It turns out that the card still appeared in the bag, which surprised the guy. He decided to see what kind of card it was and was surprised that it turned out that it was not the only card, although the guy always thought that the awakened always use one card. Gate cards began to burst out of the bag one after another, which surprised Okita even more. He simply did not understand how he got so many of them. A huge number of cards appeared in front of him, and the only question in his head was how one person could have such a huge deck. Then he realized that this could be due to a glitch and the cards could be damaged. He decided to check one of the cards and began to choose. His choice fell on one of the cards. He had no hope for the normal action of the card. Immediately, full information about the card entered his head and he was surprised. He immediately realized that this feeling did not end only with the secret card he touched. His head was filled with information about each card, and he could not understand how this happened. It was as if his head was working like a computer, and in the guy's eyes there was only a lack of understanding of what was happening. The head was overloaded, but the information stopped flashing every second. Having concluded that the download was most likely completed, the guy assumed that now he could use the cards. His choice fell on the dark two-headed serpent. The activation of the card in purple tans immediately began. Okita was distracted by the fact that now he knew the name of everyone, and then he realized that he had summoned a snake and it scared him. A rather two-headed dragon appeared before his eyes. The guy even suggested that this was a very rare card, and perhaps even higher in rank than A. The card clearly wanted to show its strength and the snake was preparing to attack. Soaring up, the snake struck the neutral zone, so as not to injure the owner of the card. The guy was so amazed that, noticing the impending attack, he could not move. When the attack hit the ground, Okita was amazed by the power of the entire attack. He assumed that all the cards could be of the same power and he clearly liked it. After looking around, he decided to choose a few more cards that he decided to try and test. Having selected several different ones, I began to activate them. The first thing he was interested in was trying out Magic Volley and Silver Arrow. Further cards that caught his eye were Whirlwinds of Flame and Surface Transformation. During activation, Okita also managed to feel a little fear from what was happening. Everything was flying around him due to a large accumulation of energy. For the first time, a smile similar to the one he had seen in his direction appeared on the guy's face. He liked the very process of his praise and what happened to him today, just as the thirst for revenge consumed him. He was interested in the reaction of the others. Now he understood that he was not afraid of either the dungeon bosses or the people who had so easily abandoned him to his death. A rift appeared throughout the room, which was provoked by the attacks of the cards that Okita tried. The guy tried most of the cards and understood that each of them was superior in strength to cards of rank A. Looking at what was happening in the room, he realized that the practice would be finished for now, or there would definitely be nothing left of the room. His thoughts were still filled with what happened. He still didn't understand what had happened. He was always told that the awakened ones could only have one card, but they could use it an unlimited number of times. The ranking system was very unfair, because the A ranks, so to speak, were representatives of the company and used rare, strong cards. Next came ranks B and C, which were support ranks and helped the highest ranks. The D and E ranks were supposed to protect their superior colleagues, and the F rank was mostly just expendable. There are rumors that there were also S-rank awakened ones who surpassed even A rank and very significantly, but there was very little information about them. The guy still could not understand why he could use several cards, and in general, awakened ones of his rank usually could not cope with such power. Looking at all the cards, he thought that most likely these were not cards of rank S. At least they spoke differently about such cards. The changes also affected his condition. Not only did his deck become very strong, and in general he began to feel differently, he did not think that the deck did this to him. He decided to think about it later. He realized that he now had the power to defeat the dungeon boss, and planned to do it now. His hand immediately reached out to the bag to collect the deck and move on. Having opened the bag, the cards immediately rushed to be in it and began to stuff themselves into it. After collecting the entire deck and closing the bag, the guy began to think, how can he get out of here now? The guy started looking around the whole room. He decided to think about how he got here and realized that then he shouted for the room to open. Gathering all his strength and putting his hand forward, he said, "Open up." Then something happened that the guy definitely didn't expect. He failed somewhere, but not as tragically as he did before. Immediately, he found himself in a cave, similar to the one through which he had walked, injured, trying to get away from the monster. He didn't understand whether he had returned to the same place or ended up in another, and immediately began to look around the place where he was. He immediately began to wonder where the boss had disappeared in this case, and even a little fear ran through his skin. Also looking around, he continued to look for something that could definitely convince him of his location. And yet his gaze fell on something that would definitely connect him with his location. He saw the marks of his injuries on the walls and already knew for sure that he was in the same place. But there was no longer any crevice. Immediately, his thoughts flew towards the fact that he had only imagined it, and it was all a dream. He immediately reached for his map bag and decided to check whether it was all just a dream or not. Opening the card bag and taking one, he shouted, "Gate!" The card was activated in the same way as before. Okita noticed this and was surprised. Now he had no doubt that everything was a dream. Having examined the map and already being sure of this, he decided to act. Immediately, the guy rushed through the corridors that he could not have walked down before and just walked and waited for the moment of reckoning. He found himself at the crossroads of two chasms and did not know where to move, deciding to listen. Immediately, he heard the actions taking place not far away. He heard the actions of the battle. He decided to see where the sounds were coming from and quietly moved up the hill. Okita found himself on a hill from what seemed to him to be a battle. But after taking a closer look, he noticed that the monster was simply watching for some reason and also began to look for where the monster was looking. Then he noticed a team with a leader who were intensely arguing about something. Okita became interested in what the argument was about. The girl strenuously argued to the second that she was making too many mistakes and that she should become bait. The leader simply watched what was happening, although one girl asked him to agree that the second should become bait. The second girl went further and stated that they would give the monster a rank D bait, which in her opinion was no longer good for anything. Rank D, in their defense, stated that they were not obligated to clean up the mistakes of rank A and were not going to be bait. Here the leader joined the conversation, who immediately told them that it didn't matter to him who would be the bait, and also mentioned that they were trying not only for themselves. The monster most likely decided that it would act on its own and began to prepare an attack. One of the girls noticed this and immediately grabbed some guy, dragging him to the hole, declaring that he should stop showing off. Okita, looking at this from the outside, also believed that rank A remained a freak, but once upon a time he also wanted to rise to rank A. He definitely made a decision for himself that he would never do it. After hitting the wall, he immediately decided that he would never pursue fame. The elite always considered everyone below them to be ordinary dirt, and the guy decided that he would bring down on them all the anger that he had for betrayal. He immediately prepared to show everything he was capable of to those who had always humiliated him. At this moment, he shouts, "Gate!" as he takes the card out of his bag. The monster immediately turns all attention to the guy and awaits further actions. The leader immediately noticed that the basilisk was distracted from them, and he was also interested in why the monster did this. The leader, looking in the same direction as the monster, noticed Okita and was surprised that he remained alive. The leader was also interested in what he was doing there. He could only see that he was with the gate map. Okita continued activating the card and did not pay attention to anyone or anything. Saying phrases one after another, he called upon the dark two-headed serpent. There was no end to the leader's defeat, especially after he saw the summoned Okita. The monster immediately reacted to the enemy that appeared. The two-headed snake immediately moved towards the monster. Okita also ordered to destroy the monster. Blood began to flow from the basilisk's mouth, and the two-headed snake grabbed his neck. The whole team could not understand what was happening, and where Okita got the two-headed dragon in his cards. There was a fierce battle between the monster and the summoned card, the card digging into the monster's armored neck. The dungeon boss also did not miss the opportunity to attack one of the heads with his tail. Okita, seeing this, immediately changed the order to have the dragon burn the monster. The two-headed man immediately began preparing a flame attack. It took the monster a little time to understand what the two-headed man was preparing to do. As soon as he realized what was starting to happen, he also set out to prepare an attack on the dragon. They merged in attacks that were precisely aimed at the life of one of them. The team also found itself in the center of events, and the echoes of both attacks flew right at them. They were thrown back by the shockwave from both attacks. Some already in flight lost consciousness from such actions. Okita was certainly pleased with his card. The attacks of both were incredibly powerful, but the attack of one was superior in strength. The two-headed man's eyes burned with rage, but the attack was over. Okita and the two-headed man froze in anticipation. The guy hoped that the attack actually at least hit the dungeon boss. He definitely made the decision that no matter how long the battle was, he would give it his all. He just wondered what attack would be next. As soon as the dust from the attacks began to settle, surprise appeared on the guy's face. The boss's body had already begun to appear and glimpses of blood were appearing. But whose? As soon as the guy saw the full picture, he was immediately surprised. The monster fell. And what was surprising was that it only took one attack. Looking at the dragon, he only praised it, calling the two-headed dragon cool. Here Okita shuddered, and some kind of window immediately appeared before his eyes. He heard a voice already familiar to him, which reported that the dungeon had been cleared. This voice also reported that the dragon's level had been increased and the title of Dragon Master had been received. As soon as Okita heard this, he realized that even some of the rarest cards can also be improved, although he could not even imagine that he would ever be able to improve cards. Only he didn't understand what kind of windows he began to see, because he had never seen anything like this before. He was interested in why there were so many of them, and he was also interested in why he suddenly began to see them. Then he saw a stone lying on the ground. He realized that this stone most likely remained from the basilisk. The stone was definitely of high rarity, and Okita noted this. He carefully touched it. Deciding to try to pick it up, he was surprised that he could do it. It was the first stone that he picked up, and it was also of high rarity. Looking at the stone from all sides, he still could not believe everything that was happening. He definitely found a common language with the two-headed man, and also thanked him for helping him defeat the monster and get the first stone in his life. He withdrew the card and allowed the two-headed snake to rest. Then something unusual caught his eye, and he decided to look at what was there. He noticed the same signs as those near the stone and assumed that there were members of the team with which he arrived at this place. He immediately rushed there, hoping that the guys were simply passed out, realizing that the dragon's attacks were too strong. Above each one there was a similar sign, and he began to come closer. Approaching everyone in turn, the guy realized that they really had simply lost consciousness. He felt more calm. After looking at the status cards of each of the team, he finally calmed down. Then something else caught his eye, namely, lying in front of him is the leader of the group, or to be more precise, Mr. Tyra, whom Okito has not yet approached. Approaching him, he also realized that everything was fine with him, and then the unexpected happened. Mr. Tyra opened his eyes and regained consciousness. He set his broken jaw through the pain and began to raise his head. Noticing Okito, he was surprised that he was without a single injury. The leader had memories. He asked Okito about what happened to the boss. He also asked where that dragon came from and talked about the fact that something urgently needed to be invented or for sure to run away. The guy calmly said that the boss was destroyed by him. The leader couldn't believe that Okito could single-handedly destroy the dungeon boss. Okito was not interested in anything other than the fact that Mr. Tyro had deceived him then. The guy was immediately flooded with memories of how the leader laughed at him. It was difficult for Okito to remember this. He was hurt by such actions towards him. The leader, looking at the guy, felt pressure and did not understand how someone could change so much in a short time. The leader was oppressed by his physical condition, and because of this, he stuttered a little and began to make excuses and say that they were not trying to deceive anyone. Tyro was able to get to his feet, still explaining that if everyone knew the truth, no one would take such a big risk, and he had to hide it to complete the task. Someone always had to do the most dangerous work, and usually if everyone knows the plan, failures always overtake them. He also decided to put pressure on the fact that he was simply waiting for Okito's abilities to develop, which is why he decided to be so rude. Okito definitely doubted the leader's words because he remembered everything perfectly. He remembered all the humiliation and how they laughed at him. It still echoed in his head. Okito clearly made the leader nervous. He understood that when they returned to the company, everyone would know about his tricks. And it wasn't just Okito. Everyone could find out that there were many such low-ranking people, and they were all initially sent to death. Then the leader, looking around, saw that no one had woken up yet, and realized that he could simply kill Okito so that no one would know about his terrible actions. But he told the guy that he would definitely boast that he had killed the monster alone, and everyone would be shocked. Then Tyro began to ask Okito how he managed to defeat the boss because he had the lowest rank. He also asked Okito to look at his map. Perhaps he understood what the leader wanted to do and happily decided to show his card. Okito pulled the card in front of him to show it to the leader, but Tyro snatched it and threw it away, thinking that he had outplayed the guy again. With contempt, he reached into his bag with cards, pretending that he was very sorry that this happened. Having taken out his card, he definitely already expressed everything in reality and said that he wanted Okito to die already. Okito guessed the outcome of events in advance and gave another card. When he took out the card, he immediately activated it. The leader was amazed that the guy had another card because he had just taken the card from him. Tyro immediately summoned War of the Sea and prepared to attack Okito. Okito also did not lag behind, and his two-headed dragon had already appeared. Although the dragon was superior to the leader's warrior, not only in size, he was already ready to dictate to the two-headed man what to do with the summoned leader. As soon as he utters bite, the two-headed one immediately acts, biting the warrior's neck. The warrior of the sea immediately returns to the map, and Tyro is left with only thoughts about how Okito was able to predict his attack. Taking a closer look, he realized that the one who summoned the dragon last time was Okito, and he was amazed. Drowning in the fear of death, the leader awaited further actions in which Okito reassured him and said that he was not interested in him. Afterwards, Okito announced in one sentence that he was resigning and that he would no longer be around. When leaving, the guy also said that he would not tell anyone about what happened. He understood that he no longer wanted to have anything to do with those people and that he alone could reach heights. The leader was infuriated by the fact that some low-ranking person could treat him like that, because he is rank A. Tyro wanted to get this card for himself, and he certainly didn't care how. The leader was ready for anything. Even if it required killing, he had his gun ready. With screams and an angry face, he shot at Okito. The leader was left bewildered, because something happened that he definitely did not expect. The dragon protected Okito from the shot with its wing. Tyro already ceased to understand what was happening. He walked with a pistol towards the guy and asked him to complete all his tricks because it seemed to him that they knew his next actions. He walked and continued to shoot, despite the fact that not a single shot reached the target. Okito understood that Tyro was trying in vain because Okito had long known all his actions in advance. Tyro, in turn, did not understand why he could not hit the guy with at least one shot. How he knew everything was from the same newly acquired abilities, because there was always a sign in front of him with all the information and actions. In every moment before that, he also knew every action of Tyra. Okito knew that if he asked to show the card, He would want to knock it out and attack with a warrior. He liked that every action was predicted by signs of unknown origin. When the leader sat in fear of the guy, he already knew that as soon as he turned around, he would start shooting him in the back. He gained an unusual ability called follow-up. Now his eyes saw everything that could harm him and more. Okito decided that the time had come for his action and ordered the dragon to act. The two-headed snake immediately began to prepare for the attack, and as soon as he was ready, he began to shoot at Tyro. The first thing the snake did was knock out and break Tyro's pistol, but he didn't stop there. Tyro was already pressed into the wall, and the attacks continued to fly in his direction, and only Okito's words were heard, telling him not to relax. Tyro tried hard to dodge all the attacks from the dragon, and so far he succeeded. The attacks overtook him faster and faster, and he also tried to retreat until he found himself pressed into one of the stones, and the only thing he could do was beg Okito to stop all this. Memories immediately appeared before Okito's eyes of how he also asked to stop the attacks of one of rank A, and they didn't want to listen to him. Anger at the past burned on his face. He understood that no one did anything when he also asked to stop it. But then he thought about whether he wanted to become like everyone else. Realizing that Tyro would definitely not be able to fight due to panic, Okito stopped the attack, but still remained with me that this man was a murderer. Okito also said that they now have no right to decide who will die on this or that day, and if Tyro suddenly wants to try to kill him again, he will no longer miss. Tyro most likely didn't even hear the guy's words. His thoughts were drowned only in the fact that he doesn't even know how strong this card is, because before he's never seen a gate card that's so strong. He was so scared that he wet his pants because he believed that he would die today. No one had such strength. Okito only apologized for how much he scared his former leader and chuckled a little about it. He also threw a magic stone towards Tyro that fell from the boss of the dungeon, saying that he could take it. Tyro was surprised by this and clarified why he was doing this because he was shocked by the guy's actions, and he only stated that it would be useful for a successful report. Afterwards, he also said that he just wanted to save the face of the leader in the company and said with a grin that the team had worked hard. Having withdrawn the card, the guy realized that everything in his life had just begun and was glad about this. He slowly disappeared into the distance and realized that it was time to take action. Arriving at the company the next day, the guy knew for sure that he would quit. But as it turned out, someone was not happy about this. While he was walking down the corridor, the guy was called out and asked if it was true that he was quitting. Turning around, he saw two of his colleagues who didn't want the guy to quit. One of the girls clarified why he made such a decision. Because there were no problems with the cleanup yesterday. The second one believed that only older people quit and did not want Okito to leave them. These girls were Okito's colleagues. One of them, Yuriko, to be more precise, was a senior colleague for him. And the second colleague, Miho, was the youngest. They both worked to help new arrivals, as well as with documents. Okito said that no matter what they tried to convince him, they began to ask what he planned to do next. And he said that he would try to do something on his own. The guys watching this thought about how the lowest rank could just leave work, realizing that they would most likely simply die in that case. Miho, hearing this behavior, called out and said to stop this, but Okito said that everything was fine with him and he understood them. And Okito rather understood that such people only know how to be insolent to everyone who is lower in rank than them. The guy was amused by the fact that everyone in this company was like that. Few people thought on the merits. Here, another colleague of his could not believe in his dismissal, or was simply trying to maintain the dialogue in this way. Another colleague of the same rank as Okito himself also approached and tried to dissuade him from dismissal. This co-worker has been working here for 10 years but has never received a promotion. That guy was surprised that Okito was now walking around without glasses and decided to find out where they were. And Miho immediately started talking about how now was not the time to think about it and asked the guy to stay. Mr. Terui approached him and said that he was very sorry and that he hoped for the best for the guy. Okito was surprised that many were so worried about him. What went wrong here? For some reason, the guy suddenly became anxious and he didn't understand why this happened. Looking around, he realized what could have happened. Then the boss of the company appeared and everything became clear only when he began to approach the guy. For some unknown reason, the information plate lit up red, which amazed the guy because he didn't understand why there was no information about him. An assumption appeared in his head that the boss was also a higher rank who was above rank A. But this would definitely explain the whole situation. The boss's face expressed obvious interest in the guy, but what it could actually mean was difficult to guess.